Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please join our community by subscribing to us on the socials. Our handle on all platforms is at N2E Fantasy. We are also available on all major podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
This episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, we are covering the NFC portion of the 2024 NFL Draft and what it means for fantasy players. And we're also going to be adding a little bit of news that's happened since the last time that we've recorded. So let's just go ahead and get started with that. Ironically enough, it's actually for the AFC side almost exclusively. So, Jeff, we've talked about it for a few weeks now. OBJ is finally signed with Miami. How do you feel about that? And how do you think that that's going to play out with the wide receivers there?
So he's different than the other types of wide receivers that they typically go with. So he does add a different element. I don't know how effective he's going to be and how productive he's going to be given the plethora of talent with Hill and Waddle and Achan and Mostert, and there's just a lot of mouths to feed right now. And then they obviously added Jonnu Smith, one of your favorites. They also have Braxton Berrios. So, are they going to spread the ball around more, or is Hill and Waddle going to take 60% of this offense, 65% of this offense right off the top?
Well, Johnny Smith and OBJ bring about the same amount of yards, so they're both over 550. I think Johnny was a little bit more than 582. But I don't know how that eats into the pie here. So if Tua stays here and he's a quarterback this year and he's healthy, how many yards do you think Tua throws, and then how do we divide it up from there?
Wait, are you suggesting that Tua may not be in Miami this year? Because I heard
He
it
may not be in their
stays.
long-term. He may not be in their long-term plans.
I guess that's a great question, and we're going to have to see that through. But currently, and this is before the OBJ trade, and I can't see it increasing too much from here, but I have Tua throwing for 4,200 yards and 28 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. So out of that pie, I have Tyreek taking 1,600 yards, which he was on pace for 2,000 last year, so that's not a crazy amount. Otto with 1,250 yards, which isn't a crazy amount, but I think he did take a little bit of a step back last year. He only had 1,000 yards in 14 games. So if he does play more games this year, then obviously 1,250 is not out of the question. But as far as everyone that's on the team right now, so if you include Jonnu, Anthony Schwartz, Braxton Berrios, the running backs, they're at 4,200 yards already, so I'm going to have to squeeze OBJ in here. So we're going to have to see who he starts taking stats away from, basically.
Yeah, I think that assuming Tua plays the entire season, he's probably going to be closer to 4,500 than 4,200, just because of the way the offense is.
Okay. He played the whole season last year and had 4,600 yards, so I can easily see that. And I think I'm going to make that increase right now because you just talked me into it.
I think OBJ, it's tough because there is a lot of weapons there now, and they drafted Malik Washington and Taj Washington in the draft as well. So those guys are probably more long-term roster fill-ins and not immediate guys this season. So it would be Hill and Waddle, like you said, and I roughly agree with the numbers that you put up there. So it's between Berrios, OBJ, and Jonnu. What are they going to put up with and put up there for stats? And obviously, then other people are going to get stats as well. So, like you said, the running backs there too. It's tough. I don't think
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think OBJ is going to be that big of a factor unless somebody gets hurt. He's not someone I'm targeting in fantasy.
I can agree with that. Part of me wonders if they want to keep Anthony Schwartz around too, because he's a fast wide receiver and he's 23 years old. So he kind of fits the mold of their wide receivers, but he's not a super skilled, super talented wide receiver. So it'll be interesting to see if it's something that they actually do.
Yeah, but the most important news about OBJ going to Miami is he broke up with Kim Kardashian, so now he gets to hang out with all the beautiful ladies on the beach and the clubs down there. So that's the biggest thing on his mind, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great city to be single in. So OBJ, I wonder if I wonder if Kim was like, if you go to Miami, we're breaking up. Like, I wonder if these conversations actually happened or if they're just happening in my head.
Maybe. I'm not sure why she wouldn't go with him, but I don't know why anyone would want to be in a relationship with Kim Kardashian personally. But
She's got
good for
clout.
him. I think this is the best. I think this is the best cultural fit for him, and they were the team that was most interested, seemingly, in signing him. So probably a good fit for him. I just don't think he's going to put up good statistics this year.
All right. So I'll let you cover the next bit of news because one of your favorite wide receivers have signed with the Buffalo Bills. Who was it?
Chase Claypool, who his last team was also Miami, he is signed with Buffalo. They need wide receiver depth. He's still an athletic player. I just don't think that he's dedicated to football, and I don't think that he's going to be successful until he gets his mind on the game. I've had issues with him over the past year or two because that's just who he is. He has all the talent in the world, but he can't focus on being a good professional football player. He could be a good wide receiver, but he chooses not to be, and that's very frustrating. So, low risk move for Buffalo. I don't think it moves the needle at all. Yes, it's like buying a lottery ticket. If he decides to get his mind right, it might actually be useful, but probably not.
So I think you're a little hard on him. Like the way you just described that you guys have some beef from the past. Yeah, I wonder if he's been through it enough now where he actually has a much better view of what he should be doing on the football field and what his actual job is. Buffalo made it seem like a big enough signing where they actually posted a picture of him signing his contract. If Claypool returns to his rookie and second year form at all, this could be a big asset for Josh Allen as they search for wide receivers. And obviously, this is the most talented quarterback that Claypool has played with since Ben Roethlisberger. So there is that little bit and tidbit as well.
Yeah, I
No, I
don't see
don't
it.
count Justin Fields as talented.
Well, you should because he's going to be an electric kick returner with these new rules.
That is the rumor coming out of Pittsburgh is that they are going to use Justin Fields as a kick returner. They've declined his quarterback fifth-year option of $25 million. They've also declined Najee's fifth-year option of $6 million, which is a little bit surprising given the low cap number. But yeah, how do you feel about? We should talk about that. How do you feel about Fields potentially returning kicks?
Well, I'm glad that they found a use for him. I don't think that they found a use for Russell Wilson yet, so we'll see when they announce that.
Maybe
They
he'll
are
catch
paying
passes.
they are paying Justin Fields more money than they're paying Russell Wilson, so I think that should be taken into account. Najee's kind of surprising just from the standpoint where his fifth year option seems like the going rate for a running back. Maybe they could get away with less guaranteed money than that, but it would still be the same dollar number. But it just goes to show you that Jalen Waddle is the running back to own between the two of those guys. I'm sorry, not
Jalen
Jalen Waddle.
Waddle.
Jalen Warren.
Yeah, it's
The other running back there. The other running back in
well,
Pittsburgh.
I had to call you out
But
on that one. We just
yeah,
got done talking about what.
yeah. I think both running backs are going to be used, but it doesn't make sense if you're not going to use one as a bell cow to pay him a significant amount of money. So I guess that's where they're going with it. But to me, I probably would have extended him personally, even if he wasn't going to be a bell cow. So that's where they are. I still don't think Chase Claypool is going to be a good receiver in the NFL. So you're welcome to take that dive. I won't be doing it. So it's not going to happen.
I think he's worth a last round flyer, but we'll see.
You know who might be worth a last round flyer? Chark has signed with the LA Chargers after they flirted with Boyd, former Bengals wide receiver. They signed DJ Chark, and now he is yet another wide receiver on that roster that is above Quentin Johnston's. Where in the pecking order does DJ Chark fall, and is he someone that you target in fantasy?
So the whole depth chart for the Chargers is up in the air for me at this exact moment. There's four wide receivers that could be the number one, and I even like their fifth wide receiver. So I know this isn't as flashy as it was last year, but in present day, I have Josh Palmer the number one, and I have Quentin Johnson the number two. I have Lad McConkey the third and DJ Shark the fourth. And then Darius Davis, who I like from last year, the fifth. So they have some interesting depth now. Like It's not what we expected after last year, but they have something.
Well, they're going to be a run first attack, and I think you'll be surprised how many targets go to the tight ends that they have over the wide receivers, at least the first year. But
Maybe they
to me,
only
Ladd
have
McConkey,
Disley and Hurst though.
those are guys they like. Otherwise, they would have taken Mr. Bowers, and they didn't.
Well, they
I
were going
think,
offensive line no matter what, I think, in the first.
yeah, but they took a left tackle when they needed a right tackle. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway,
Harbaugh will make it make sense, and you'll see his great plan very shortly. But
Ladd McConkey's number one, in my opinion.
no, 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 no,
Ladd
no, no.
McConkey's number one, Palmer's number
You're way
two,
too
Charles
high on the
probably number
rookie.
three. Harbaugh's words for Ladd McConkey is he's a Brock Bowers light. You can use him all over the place. He's good inside, good outside. So I think they got him for a reason. He drafted him over his Michigan guys, and I think that they're going to use him. He's going to be the number one.
We'll see. We will see. But let's not forget Quentin Johnson is still there.
No, we've all forgotten Quentin Johnson, and we will never remember him because he'll
You want to.
never rebound his career.
I always find it so weird to root against a guy. Like I root for him to find his skill set this year. Like I want to see better football. I want to see him out on the field. I want to see that number one pick work out. It's just weird to be like, nope, he's done. We're writing him off. But
No, I'm not rooting against him. I'm just predicting that he will not have a good career.
and
That's
you're
not
rooting for your
against him.
prediction to be correct.
I'm not rooting against it. I have no vested interest in it. I have no bets on it. Nothing other than he doesn't have it. That's it.
All right. So you're okay with being wrong on this.
If he fixes his issues with catching the ball and has a good career, I'd be very happy for him.
I think he will, and I think he'll start doing it this year. Now, the only thing that we need to like hash out here in the next couple of weeks is Justin Herbert's passing numbers. And it doesn't have to be today, but I think the over-under is still set at 4,200 yards. It does sound like you're leaning the under. I am 100% on the over on this. So I don't even need to be talking to that.
I don't think so, man. I think it's gonna be ground and pound.
I don't think so. The NFL doesn't win like that. Even the heaviest rushing teams pass 65% of the time.
No, the Ravens. They literally passed 51% to 49% last year.
Okay, but that's not going to be the case. Because they have a rushing quarterback. There's a much bigger difference there.
Half the
With a
league
pocket
has
passer
rushing quarterbacks.
that doesn't exist. What?
Half the league has rushing quarterbacks now, I feel like.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and a pocket passer would never even approach that amount.
I think the Steelers are going to be more like the Ravens last year with the quarterbacks they chose to roll with and the system that they brought up. I think they're going to be running a lot more.
We'll see. Russ isn't really a rusher anymore, so you brought him in to pass.
Oh, you brought him in the hand off the ball. Anyway, we should actually start talking about the NFC teams. We've been talking about
Come
AFC.
on, the AFC is so much fun.
It is. I think so. Well, especially since, my team's in the AFC.
That's true.
The NFC has been trying to make strides to be as competitive as the AFC, so let's talk about their drafts. So, if you're wearing a Panthers hoodie and you're shaking your head, NFC, so.
Yeah, I want it to continue to suck so we can work our way up.
So you have a chance?
Yeah, I'm not dumb.
All right. Well, let's get started with the Arizona Cardinals. They drafted, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in the league, Marvin Harrison Jr. And then took a pass rusher, Darius Robinson, at 27th at the end of the first round. So the Texans' former pick. Max Milton, quarterback. Trey Benson, who was my running back one out of this rookie class. And I think, to me, he's still the running back one after the draft as well. I don't know what that means for James Conner other than this is probably the beginning of the end for him. He'll probably still have a good role this year and the transition will happen. I don't know what this means for Michael Carter. I mean, Michael Carter is younger than James Conner. I don't know if he's a depth piece or if he will stick around long term or not. They also got Isaiah Adams, guard, Tip Ryman, who is a good blocking tight end that has the potential to be an okay passer. He's one of the guys that we talked about prior to the draft. And then they filled out the rest of their roster because they had a million picks in this class. Jeff, how do you feel about the Cardinals' picks, and how do you feel about them after these selections?
So I think they are in contention to win the division this year. I don't know if they actually do it, but I do think having a number one wide receiver with Kyler Murray has been a winning formula in the past. That was with the unbelievably dysfunctional Cliff Kingsbury crew. If it was done once, it can be done again. I obviously have some concerns about Marvin Harrison. It looks like he's holding out on an NFLPA contract, and they can't even sell his jersey or include him in Madden in present day. So I don't know if these are it's going to be a normal dispute going forward because of the NIL in college football, or if this is just wide receiver diva like tendencies. So it's just something that has my antennas up and my radar is tracking this now currently. But after that, they did attack the rushing side of the football as well. So now they have a new running back and a new wide receiver. They still have James Conner, who probably does take a step down for me, not completely off the roster. He'll probably be the lead back in 2024, but that'll probably be his last year as a lead back in the NFL, if I had to guess. Michael Carter was a waiver claim last year, so we'll have to see how Michael Carter gets thrown into this. And he'll get much more comfortable because you have to remember he was waiver claimed mid-season last year. We'll see if he can get much more comfortable with this playbook, this offense, playing with Kyler Murray. There's a lot that could happen. And this is a training camp to pay attention to. We're going to have to pay attention to Benson. We're going to have to pay attention to what happens with Harrison and his contract. Like, is he going to be just as hard on the Cardinals with this contract that he is with the NFLPA? We'll see. Like, could he be a holdout until training camp starts? He could be. I mean, it's very possible. And then Tip Ryman was a good pick. Obviously, they lost Zach Ertz last year, so he kind of will slot into that tight end 2 slot that's open for the Cardinals. But as far as everything else, they did hit areas of need, and they had over 10 picks in this draft. So they had to have hit on at least 5 to 7 of them.
They should, especially since I have a lot of respect for their general manager, Monty, over there. So I think that they did well. I like the Marvin Harrison Jr. pick. I know they've got some negotiating to do on that side, like you pointed out. That's fair to point out. But talent-wise, he is the best wide receiver in this class and a very loaded class. I'm not too big on Darius Robinson. Maybe he'll be better than what I think he'll be, but I think that they needed a pass rusher, and that was a good selection for the position anyway. I like Max Nelson a lot. I wanted the Texans to draft him, and the Texans could have drafted him, but they didn't. So I think he'll be good. And I love the Trey Benson pick because I think Trey Benson's going to be the best running back out of this class. So we'll see how that plays out. Jeff, do you have any last words for this group?
No, so we go from a team that made seemingly some really good moves in this draft to a team that made some what are they doing moves. And the Atlanta Falcons started off their draft, and I kind of want to talk about this a little bit, with their 8th overall pick going with Michael Penix Jr. This is after signing Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $100 million guaranteed deal. So Kirk Cousins is on the roster for at least 2, probably 3 years at this point, and they went ahead and drafted Michael Penix Jr. What did you think of that, and how do you see them going from here?
Well, I knew going up to the draft that they were doing their due diligence on a lot of quarterbacks, but I honestly didn't think it was going to be in the first round, and I didn't think it would be 8th overall. I was definitely thinking defense or trade down. As you know, offline was like if Malik Neighbors is still there at 8, I think that they would have taken Malik Neighbors, but they were apparently dead set on taking Michael Penix, and part of that is Raheem, the head coach here. He previously tried to get full-time head coaching job before when they had Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan was like 36, and one of the things that he said then is we need a succession plan for Matt because I think he's going to be going downward. They initially didn't like that response, and so they went with Arthur Smith, who came from the Titans and worked with aged Ryan Tannehill, and he said we can work with it. So they went with him instead. That didn't work out, obviously, because he wasn't good with quarterbacks himself. And so they went back to Raheem Mostert, and Raheem said, I like Kirk, but we still need a succession plan. And I don't exactly like the way that it played out because Penix is 24. I think he'll be 25 when the season starts, and he'll probably be 27, 28 by the time he takes over this team, which isn't great to have a quarterback start that late. But to me, Kirk Cousins' contract is more like a 2-year deal than a 4-year deal. So they could probably move on from him entering that third season, and I can understand why they would be hesitant to go with only Kirk Cousins because he's 36 and coming off an Achilles tear, which not very many quarterbacks have done that in the NFL. So there's no telling how effective he's going to be this season and how effective he's going to stay, especially with him being old. I just don't like not doubling down on the quarterback that you just signed. Either you have confidence that you signed him or you don't. So they should have invested around him and then picked a middle round quarterback to uh, develop behind him, in my opinion, or taking a quarterback next year. But they're also apparently afraid of the tampering charges and how severe it's going to be. So, and they're confident in the fact that they're going to make the playoffs this year. So between those two, they felt like they had to take a quarterback early and now, otherwise they wouldn't have a chance. At least that's from everything I've heard. That seems to be all the rationale and reasoning behind why they did it. I just still don't agree with it. It's not the same as what Green Bay has done with Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre. Both of them were taken at the end of the first round. Both of them were younger when they were taken. So, I don't like it personally, but I can see why they did it.
Yeah, I just don't understand it. They had a chance to get better for this year, and you said we don't. It's not every day that quarterbacks come off of Achilles injuries, and we have two this year with Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. So we'll see what happens there. Looks like they brought in Chase McClellan and Casey Washington, running back and wide receiver, and it looks like they hit defense with the rest of their picks. I expected them to go defense early because they had spent so much money on offense in free agency that I didn't expect them to go offense early. And you did expect them to go offense early. You thought maybe Rome Otunze, Neighbor. You thought any one of those wide receivers were a potential fit here. And I was like, you're crazy. They've spent too many high picks on skill position players over the last 3 years, going with Pitts and then London and then Bijan all being top 10 picks. Speaking of Kyle Pitts, his 5th-year option has been picked up, which is surprising and isn't surprising at the same time. Do you think with Kirk Cousins he'll be utilized much more effectively? Oh, and then Matt Ryan signed a 1-year deal to retire Falcons. So the Falcons had Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins, and Michael Penix all under contract on the same week. So they needed another quarterback.
Yeah. So I will just circle back to Jason McClellan. Although he went relatively late in the draft, he's someone that I thought would be a sneaky person to target in Dynasty. And I absolutely hate this spot because he's behind, one of the top running backs, Bijan Robinson, and he's also behind the guy that never goes away behind him there. So I really wanted him to go to a team that needed a running back, and I'm very disappointed. Casey Washington doesn't move the needle for me at all. I'm surprised he was drafted. I thought he'd be an undrafted free agent somewhere. But they did try to target defense in the middle of this draft, and they reached for athletic traits and Aurora. It's just
I don't
it's a
know if you
fun
saw
name
the
to
announcement for that,
pronounce.
but you're pretty close.
Yeah, Bailey Trice is pretty decent. Brandon Dorless is okay, but honestly, I think that they just shotgun approach the defense, and we'll see if those guys work out. Penix, the issue now since they made the Penix selection is Kirk is going to be doing a lot of rehab. I know he just recently started throwing with the guys, but Penix is going to get necessarily better for primetime games either because he's had his failings there too. But it's just, why would you put your quarterback in a situation like that? I just don't know how it's going to play out this year. As a Panthers fan, are you thrilled with how Atlanta has handled their offseason muddling the
Yeah,
quarterback situation?
yeah, absolutely. I am. And then we can hop right into the Carolina Panthers here because they didn't get any better, but the Panthers do appear to have gotten better. And the Carolina Panthers draft, they went with 32, Xavier Leggett. Where did you have him for wide receivers going into the pre-draft process?
Oh,
Do you remember if he was top 7? I think he was top 7.
I'll circle back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jonathan Brooks was a great pick. I think he could be the running back 1 for this team. We're going to have to see if he can overtake Sanders and Hubbard in this backfield. I absolutely think he can this year. He is coming off the ACL tear. And then I think we got a steal in the at pick 101 with Jatavian Sanders, tight end, position of need, given that Hayden Hurst was cut this year and that there really isn't much there with Ian Thomas and Tommy Tremble at that position currently. Now, the rest of the draft, we did go defense with Trevin Wallace, linebacker, Chu Smith Wade, cornerback, and then defensive tackle Jaden Crumdy and linebacker Michael Barrett. So it does seem like we hit positions of need in this draft. I don't know if that is going to be enough to get us out of the basement in the South. Now, I do think, circling back to Atlanta, I do think Atlanta has a shot to become the number 1 seed in the South this year. Like, I don't think New Orleans is better than them. I do think Tampa might take a step back, losing their offensive coordinator. So Atlanta may have the inside track to being the top team in the South. I don't know if Carolina has done enough to get themselves out of the basement this year. But if anyone could turn around Bryce Young, if anyone could turn around this offense, it's going to be their new head coach. Alex, what are your thoughts on the Carolina Panthers draft?
So, to answer your earlier question, Xavier Legette was my number 7 wide receiver from the video that we did earlier. And Jonathan Brooks is my number 2 running back. I know he's a lot of people's number 1s. And Jatavian Sanders from the tight end that they took, he is my number 2 tight end. So the Panthers is really good at the skill positions here. They should improve. I know they spent a lot of money working on their offensive line this offseason, getting 2 new guards. So hopefully
they were expensive.
Things will hopefully things will improve, especially with Dave Canales as head coach. We'll see if he can continue the magic. I know he's made Russell Wilson look really good, as well as he's made wide receivers like Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett look really good as well. And he's made Baker Mayfield have one of his best seasons, if not his best season this past year. So I'm hoping that
did you say Geno too?
And Geno as well. Geno had his best year with Dave Canales as the OC.
So you're saying there's a chance.
That's right. So I would be optimistic if I was a Carolina Panthers fan. I'm just very curious how this wide receiver room shakes out now, because you have Legette, you have Thielen, and you have Mingo, who's still around. Terrace Marshall, who may or may not be around. What now?
Deontay Johnson, let's go.
Deontay Johnson, who he was told from the coaching staff that he would be the number 1 option. So we'll see if that ends up being true.
It's only essentially a 1-year deal. I could see it for 1 year, him being the number 1 option. But I do think, to your point, I think Terrace Marshall could be on the trade block. He's still pretty young. So you might see a team take a risk on a Terrace Marshall as a potential receiving option now that the draft is done.
I've been told the Bills would have been the best landing spot because Brady was his college coach. So
yeah, Terrace Marshall's only 23 years old, and I don't believe he's ever gotten a chance to shine.
It would have been a better signing than Chase Claypool. So we'll see. We'll see if that changes.
They would have had to give up something for him, though. The low end pick next year.
Or he could get released at some point, so we'll see.
That is true. We have in 3 months and a little bit less than, actually a little more than 3 months. We have cut down days where we go from 90 to 53, but we can move forward.
All right. Well, let's power through this now. We've got our third team here who actually picks first. That's the Chicago Bears. They took Caleb Williams first overall. They were able to snag Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington, with the 9th overall pick. They didn't pick again until 75, and they got an offensive tackle, which is position of need. They took a punter towards the end of the draft and an edge in Austin Booker. That was all the draft picks that they had, and I thought that they just about made the most of it. I don't know if Kieran, the offensive tackle, or Booker, the edge that they took, are going to end up being good, but they're positions of need. Man, I don't know if there's never been a rookie quarterback that's ever had the supporting cast that Caleb Williams is walking into. And I've heard it before, if Justin Fields had this same supporting cast, would he have been more successful? Probably. But he didn't get it. And we'll see if Caleb Williams can thrive. I'm very curious, Jeff, how this wide receiver room shakes out, because they traded for Keenan Allen before the draft. So they have DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. How do you see that shaking out, and are any of them worth taking early?
So, I do have a lot of thoughts on this. I don't have a lot of thoughts on their drafts other than Rome Odunze was a shocking pick just because I expected them to go defense there and be the Chicago Bears of old. Clearly, they've now started prioritizing offense, and this is hopeful for the future because I believe that this year for 2024, you're going to be looking at Keenan Allen being the number one, and I think that is well supported with the relationship that Caleb Williams and Keenan Allen already have. And I think the fact that Keenan Allen's probably a 1-year safety blanket for Caleb Williams here. Now, the number two I still think is DJ Moore, but you have to remember DJ Moore signed a 3-year, $60 million contract with Carolina Panthers before he was traded to the Bears. That deal has to be really close to being up now. I'm not sure if there's 1 or 2 years left on that deal, but so that's something to keep in mind here. And then I think Rome Odunze takes the third receiver position this year, and I think they really like ease him into action because I don't think they need him in 2 receiver sets this year. But we'll see what happens. But that's just my take on this, and this is what I would do if I were the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I could see DJ Moore being on the move next year. Yeah, and I could see them re-signing Keenan Allen, honestly. That's not out of the realm of possibility. I think Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze have the best connection with Kate, so DJ is eventually going to be the odd man out, in my opinion.
Yeah, the Bears have 2 years left on the DJ Moore deal, and there is essentially very little dead cap right now and no dead cap next year because of the trade. So they have a $15 million or $16 million cap hits this year and next year for DJ Moore, which does seem very reasonable. And I probably wouldn't move on to him with him until the end of the 2025 season, especially at $16 million.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next team here, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas moved down from 24 to 29 with Detroit and picked up an extra pick. They took Tyler Guyton on the offensive line, so he's going to be a tackle. He might be developmental to begin the year, but they'll also pick up another offensive lineman with that additional pick at 73 with Cooper Beebe. Their other picks were seemingly devoted mostly to defense, so Ed Marshawn Nealon in the second round, I thought he was a pretty good pick. I don't know how I feel about Maurice Leofu. I don't know if he's going to be that great or not, but he's someone to keep an eye on if you're a defensive guy. But I thought they fleshed out their roster pretty well, other than addressing running back or quarterback at all. So that tells me that Zeke was always in their plans because they did sign Ezekiel Elliott back to the team, and he's probably going to be the starter. I would imagine that they want to bring somebody else in at some point, and they might. I just don't know who that would be. It also tells me that they will eventually work something out with Dak, but they're sticking to whatever line they have in the sand over the contract. But Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones, he has caved and overpaid players before, so I could see him doing that. I don't think there's a real succession plan. They declined Trey Lance's 5th-year option, so he could be somebody that could take over, but I just don't see it. So Dallas probably keeps the status quo, but I think they did well to flesh out and the rest of the roster and recover from some key losses. We'll see how that goes, but I don't think that they're going to be any better than they were last year.
Yeah, where are you taking their new running back? And are you surprised they didn't draft a running back?
I am. It was almost like he did it on purpose. He did it purposely to thumb his nose at fantasy owners because everyone would have swarmed that one running back, whoever they took in rookie drafts, and they didn't do it. So if I am Jesper, I would take Zeke pretty low in a draft, especially like a best ball, or if I just need a 1-year fill-in in a dynasty, I think I would take Zeke and throw a dart at him. But I'm not counting on him to be Zeke of old. I'm not counting on him to be a top 12 back or anything.
One thing for sure is he's going to have a new number in Dallas at the number 15. He's always wanted to wear the number 15. He only wore 21 because it's basically the reverse of 15. That's why he has that chain that you can turn around and it looks like 21, and you can turn it around and it looks like 15. But yeah, so we'll see. I'm not you could convince me that Dallas goes out and finds a running back via trade somewhere between now and the beginning of the season as well, especially as cutdowns begin to happen or get closer. I don't know what team in the AFC has an extra running back right now. I think that the likelihood of like Green Bay trading like a AJ Dillon or Chicago trading a Khalil Herbert to them is pretty low, because why would they want to help Dallas, who was a contender last year, potentially be a contender again this year? And we will see what actually comes from all of that. But yeah, I'm right with you. Not going to take Zeke too high in drafts. He's currently rated as my 34th running back right now, so that will probably be like a eighth or ninth round pick, and it's not a terrible time to pick him. We have to remember the last 4 weeks of last season, he was the number 9 fantasy running back for the Patriots. So he still does have something. I know everyone out there is going to say he has nothing. He's proven that he can still score fantasy points, and he's done that as soon as the last 4 weeks last year, where he was the number 9 running back.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be the number 9, that's for sure, but I think that he'll probably be in the low 20s. So I think he can be on the borderline of, flex or RB2, especially if he gets the volume in Dallas. I could see that. It's also notable that Dallas did not address the wide receiver position at all. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like they're supporting Dak. To me, Brandon Cooks isn't it. Tolbert could potentially be something, but at this point, it would be a third-year breakout. So we'll see if that becomes a thing. But I'm very surprised letting Michael Gallup go, that they didn't bring somebody in better, especially in this historic draft class. Why did they not take a wide receiver? I just don't get it.
They have
Well,
two
they
good
did,
ones.
but I should clarify they did. They took Ryan Flournoy, but he's not someone I think should have been drafted.
But I don't think rosters are completely set yet, obviously, because we have all these signings, and yeah, we just have Tyler Boyd still out there. MVS is still out there. I know how much you love him. But Russell Gage is still out there. I know he's returning off of a year off from ACL tear. But let's not forget that Tampa gave him quite a big deal. And we're just looking for role guys at this point. We're not even looking for guys that could get 900 yards. We're looking for guys that could get 400 to 600 yards and contribute to the offense. And that's like a Tyler Boyd could do it, a Hunter Renfrow. There are still players out there that could contribute to offenses.
Yeah, I think those would be good stabs to take. So I think those would be good guys to add to the roster. All right, let's keep pounding away here. So Detroit is next, and they are the team that traded with the Cowboys. They traded up to get Terrion Arnold, who was considered one of the top corners in this draft. Because the first 14 picks were all offensive players, a lot of good defensive players fell, so Detroit leaped at the opportunity to take him. They also got Ennis Rakestraw Jr., another corner, in the second round, and then they addressed their trenches and offensive tackle Giovanni Manu and guard Christian Mahogany really late, and Mickey Wingo, defensive tackle, also pretty late. And those are guys that all could have gone earlier in the draft. So really good value. They pretty much addressed all their positions of need, in my opinion, between this and any free agent acquisitions. I think that Detroit is still the best team in the NFC North, and I think that they'll be the team to win it. Jeff, they also signed Amon-Ra St. Brown to a 4-year extension before all this. So how do we feel about Detroit? How do you feel about their draft class and their offseason?
I think they hit positions of need in the defensive back position with their first 2 picks. St. Brown is one of the premier talents at wide receiver, and he's getting rewarded like that. He's getting one of the illustrious $30 million per year contracts, and he's earned it, deserves it, and hopefully they can continue winning. I mean, as contracts bloat, there's going to be less talent around that you can pay. So it's just something to look out for. They're considering extending Jared Goff as well. And they also extended Penei Sewell, their tackle. So money is going to become a cap issue at some point. You're going to have to pick and choose who you want to keep at some point.
All right, let's go to their division rival here, the Green Bay Packers. And the Packers had a number of draft picks this go around, and they seem to address most of their needs. In the first round, they got offensive tackle Jordan Morgan. Second round, they got Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker. Javon Bullard, safety. And then they also got Marshawn Lloyd in the third round, who is one of my favorite running backs in this class. Um, they fleshed out the rest of their roster. They got Michael Pratt late, who was considered like a top 8 quarterback prospect in this draft class. So that's interesting that they'll have someone to potentially groom behind Jordan Love. If Jordan Love was a 1-year wonder, they might have a succession plan. But either way, it's pretty smart to get someone late. Jeff, if you like Marshawn Lloyd, would you be worried about Josh Jacobs' contract situation?
So no, because they did sign him to what was a 4-year deal. I'll look that up in the background here, but I do believe that it was a longer term deal. So I don't think Josh Jacobs needs to look over his shoulder. Out of both names that you could have messed up, Edrin Cooper or Marshawn Lloyd, I thought you would have said Marshawn Lynch there because it's so close to the Marshawn L of it all. But nothing the Packers did surprise me. They need to shore up both lines, which they worked on. They need to shore up their defense. They didn't need another wide receiver. They didn't go after another wide receiver. They need their wide receivers to stay healthy, which they fired their strength and conditioning coach or team or whatever they have there. So they're trying to figure out whatever they can to keep their players at that position healthy. And they obviously have Jordan Love, and Michael Pratt's just probably could be a career backup to Jordan Love, but it does seem like one of these wide receivers do need to emerge as the alpha. And if I were putting my money on this, which maybe I will, Jaden Reed would be my guide for the alpha to step out of this group, out of Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Wicks, and Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed is kind of the guy that I would put my money on as the guy that would be the alpha out of this group. But we'll see if he continues to develop into year 2 here. They have 2 and 3. They have 4 2 and 3 year wide receivers on the roster that are the top 4 receivers. So they're all dirt cheap. And their quarterback signed a 2-year bridge deal before last year because they kind of hedged their bets that they might have had the guy. And they also hedged their bets that they didn't want to lose him to free agency this year. So they gave him a little bit more money, but it kind of worked out in the end, which does lend the question, do you I mean, this is more rhetorical. This isn't really like a question that needs an answer right now, but I think it's very likely this year that the Packers go after Jordan Love for a longer term deal instead of letting him finish out this year, last year of his contract, basically. So
Well, they could still franchise tag him, right?
they could, but we'll see what they do. But they typically
If I
take
was the
care of their
Packers,
franchise quarterbacks.
if I was the Packers, I would want to make sure it wasn't a 1-year wonder. See
He
if he
did
does it
get better
again.
as the year went on too. That was the best part about Jordan Love
So,
because
I
he
mean,
started off shaky.
if he starts off this year like really good, I could see them like extending him in the middle of the season. If I was them, I'd want to see it a little bit longer because you can always franchise tag him. Yeah, I don't think that anywhere else is as good of a spot for Jordan Love as right where he's at. So I think the best thing for both of them is to play well and figure out an extension if they play well.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the prospects of the Green Bay Packers and watching them grow. I do think Josh Jacobs is at least a durability upgrade over Aaron Jones. I don't know if he's a skill set upgrade, but he probably is in some areas. So I'm interested to see what Jordan Love does with Josh Jacobs being the for sure lead back, because I think Dylan is the third back on the team now. So there's no like split or timeshare there. Lloyd will spell him occasionally, but I do think Josh Jacobs will be the lead back for this team, this very intriguing team.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next team here, and that is the Los Angeles Rams. They started off the draft. Their first and second picks were Florida State University defenders. So we got edge rusher Jared Verse and defensive tackle Braden Fisk, both of whom I liked in this process. So one, they got good players in position of need. They also came from the same team, so they already have good chemistry. So I thought that was pretty interesting how they approached it. Then they also took Blake Corum, the running back out of Michigan, and that was interesting because they already have Kyron Williams as their starter, but they took Blake Corum because he's almost a carbon copy of Kyron Williams, and they like that kind of running back. So he's insurance for Kyron Williams as well as on a cheap deal and could eventually replace Kyron Williams. So I would be very curious how that played out, but in redrafts, if you have Kyron Williams, I feel like you have to have Blake Corum as well. For Dynasty, I would also want to acquire Blake Corum in this offense too. But they also addressed safety with Cameron Kinchins, which I thought was a pretty good selection as well. And they fleshed out the rest of their draft. No one to me is that notable for the rest of their draft class, but their first four picks were really good. And this is a team that has been draft pick poor since they traded for Stafford. So this was the first full draft for them, and I thought it was a good one. Jeff, what do you think of this?
So the Rams hit their position of need because Aaron Donald left a gaping hole. And as you said, teammates coming in, we're going to see if it works. But, I am worried about Kyron Williams. I really am. He graded last in either hurries or hits or QB rushes, and I just believe that they're trying to look for a more pass protection better option. And I don't know if Blake Corum's it, but they also signed Boston Scott. So they have other back options. It does seem like Joshua Carty, which I don't know anything about college kickers right now. And the reason why I don't spend a lot of time on college kickers is because they rarely pan out, especially the big name ones. So it does like Polanco, if you remember the one that the Bucks drafted in the third or fourth round a couple of years ago, but he's nowhere to be found in the league anymore. It's
You don't
just
take
it
kickers before the seventh round. You just don't do it.
yeah. So I do believe so I wonder if Mare will be back with them at some point this season if this kicker does fail or cease to amaze them basically. But he does appear to be the only kicker on the roster right now, and we will see where we go from here with this. But they're also rebuilding their offensive line, no tackles, which was a little bit interesting given the fact that they lost Whitworth a year ago. Like, I feel like that's a position that they should continue to pound offensive tackles, but they really hit that defensive line now that Aaron Donald's gone, which tells me that they thought that Aaron Donald was the entire off or defensive line. So they hit four defensive linemen in the first 200 picks of the draft. So they told us early and often that was an important position, and at the very least, it could create a rotation of linemen and keeps them fresh. And we'll see if it works out. But this is the first year that they've had this many picks in a very, very long time. And it does seem like they've hit on a good chunk of them lately, even with less picks. So with more picks, let's hope they continue this trend. And this division is going to be much more tough this year than I think a lot of people are realizing. I think Arizona's better. I think the 49ers are getting older, so they're going to be a little bit less better. And the Rams are getting better. The Rams have been retooling for the last 2.5, 3 years. And I think the Rams could be right up there. And then obviously the Seahawks. I don't know what the Seahawks are doing. The Seahawks might be the bottom dwellers of this division right now.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to them in a bit. Boy, I can't wait for us to start doing our win-loss predictions and do some team rankings and see where everything shakes out. But it's interesting going through the draft to see where everything is at this moment. But let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings. They did not, in fact, have to trade up to 4 or 5 to be able to take J.J. McCarthy. They only moved up one spot from 11 to 10 to be able to take him. And then following the Texans playbook, they traded up for a Alabama edge rusher in the draft as well with Dallas Turner at 18. And I felt that they made the most of their other late round picks following that with Kyrie Jackson at cornerback and Walter Roos at offensive tackle. They also took a kicker, Will Richard, in this one as well. Michael Jurgens, who's a center, I think his brother plays for the Eagles, and Levi Drake Rodriguez, defensive tackle. So a lot of their moves were made in free agency and signing a bunch of players there, but they felt like they needed to get a quarterback. I think that they wanted to trade up for Drake May, and 3 first-round picks wasn't good enough for New England to back off, and I think New England also wanted Drake May as well. So they took McCarthy. I don't think McCarthy starts right away, and I'm not a huge fan of McCarthy myself. I think he's young and has a lot of upside, but I don't think he's ready to be a starter in the NFL, Jeff. How do you feel about the Vikings draft here?
Oh man, I was surprised to watch them trade up one spot, and I'm assuming the reason was someone else was trying to trade up to that spot. Like there would be no other reason to trade up just ahead of the Jets. The Jets were never taking JJ McCarthy. Dallas Turner at 18, he's the guy that could have went in the top 10. So I do think they got good value there. I just don't think this draft played out any way that they thought it would, because I think they acquired those two top picks for to move up into the top 10, those two first round picks to go into the top 10 and actually grab a Drake May or even JJ McCarthy higher. So it is interesting how it panned out. I think the success of their team this year, because they have so many weapons with Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson, all the Suns, they're going to have to depend on Darnold and McCarthy to get this job done. And I think their entire season depends on how quickly and if these quarterbacks can get something together.
Yeah, we will see how the development goes, but he's in a good spot for him, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll see if he actually turns into a good quarterback. But
So
we
you
can move
said
on.
you said with
Go
Caleb
ahead.
Williams, no rookie quarterback has ever went to a better landing spot. But do you believe JJ McCarthy might have a better landing spot than or better weapons around him than Caleb Williams? Like if you look at Hawkinson, Addison, and Jefferson, and then you factor in the running back of Aaron Jones, JJ McCarthy might be right up there with one of the best top 10 picks, like offense they got inserted into.
And you can also say that Minnesota has an offensive head coach, which would be better. So I think that to me, the Bears' offensive line is better than the Vikings' offensive line. I think that the Bears' wide receiver depth is better. Obviously, Minnesota has the best one with Justin Jefferson, but Hawkinson is when he's healthy, he's an improvement over Cole Kmet, but Cole Kmet is no slouch at tight end. Running back wise, I like Aaron Jones, but I don't think he's like significantly better than DeAndre Swift. So I think DeAndre Swift is more versatile. So I ultimately I think it's comparable. But
Yeah, it's just
the
interesting
three
this
wide
happened
receivers,
twice.
yeah, but it's almost like having three Justin Jeffersons on a team. Almost.
Okay. I think Addison's a great second year wide receiver. I think Hawkinson is still a top five tight end as long as his ACL heals into one
So
piece.
Justin Jefferson's the best wide receiver, and then all three of the Bears wide receivers go, and then Addison's below him.
Yep. And then Hawkinson,
Hawkinson over Cole Kmet, but they're both
always.
good. You know, it's
You
interesting.
said
They're both.
Swift over Jones?
Yeah, Swift is younger, more versatile. Jones is getting up there in age, but I think he's gonna have a good year this year.
So I I agree with you that he's younger, but I also agree that two teams have given up on DeAndre Swift the last two seasons. The Lions gave up on him, and then also the Eagles started getting away from him as the season went on last year. So it'll be interesting. This could be the Roshan show, and we don't even see it coming.
I would love that. You know, I would love that. Uh, but we've got a few more teams here to power through as well. So let's move on to the New Orleans Saints. They took a much needed offensive lineman at 14th overall. They took Tylese Fuaga, who could play guard or could play tackle for them either way, but it's much needed. They've had some issues with their offensive line staying healthy the past couple of years. They somehow got lucky getting Kool-Aid McKinstry in the second round. They've been rumored to potentially trade away Marshawn Lattimore, but that's not necessarily a given, and I think that they just shored up their defensive back situation. And they didn't have another pick until pick 150, which they used to take Spencer Rattler, the quarterback out of South Carolina. I think Spencer Rattler has a chance to be a good quarterback. I think he's got some polishing that needs to happen, but he's got a really strong arm and he throws some beautiful deep balls. So he could be someone that takes over for Derek Carr. If Derek Carr continues to struggle this year with an improved offensive line. I know they took Bud Means. I think is more of a kick returner at wide receiver. I'm not too high on him, but they also took Jalen Ford, linebacker, Christian Boyd, defensive tackle, Josiah Ezram at offensive tackle. Jeff, how do you feel about the Saints offseason, and how do you feel about them compared to your Panthers?
So obviously the Rattler pick rattles me a little bit, pun intended. Because they just signed Derek Carr, sorry, Derek Carr to a contract last year. Sorry, got the Texans on my brain here. But it does seem like this is a way of hedging bets. And would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, there's also a way to get a cheap backup as well. And let's not forget they're also paying a tight end to play quarterback slash running back slash tight end a lot of money. So they've got to one, hedge their bets with Derek Carr, and two, get an affordable backup in there.
Yeah, Carr, it feels like the team and even the wide receivers have soured on him at least a little bit. Like he's not exactly what they thought he would be. Do you think there's any buyer's remorse there?
I think there's always buyer's remorse when you pay a lot of guaranteed money for a quarterback and it doesn't work out as well as you want.
Yeah, because they didn't
I
even make the playoffs last year, right?
yeah, I don't
It was
think
the
that they made the
Bucks.
playoffs, but their offensive line was terrible. So
Mm-hmm.
they needed some upgrades here. And Michael Thomas hasn't played much over the past few years. He still hasn't signed with the team yet. Um, Alvin Kamara should probably be the starter full season, but Kendry Miller is going to be waiting in the wings. So we'll see how that shakes out. Jeff, who do you think is going to be the wide receiver two on this team? Do you think it's going to be Rashid Shaheed? Do you think it's going to be Cedric Wilson Jr.? Do you think it's going to be A.T. Perry? Who do you think it's going to end up being?
I currently have A.T. Perry, then Raheed Shaheed, then Means here.
Okay.
So I'm lower on Cedric Wilson, and I think a lot of that has to do with his age. And I just don't see it being a long-term solution or a long-term fit. He'll be 29 during this season, and he really hasn't produced a ton of seasons that have been wow. So I have moved Bud Means ahead of him for right now. But I think the number 2 wide receiver question in this offense is A, going to be usable, and B, unknown at this point.
Okay. That's fair. I still like A.T. Perry from last year, but we
Yep.
will see if he makes strides with this team. I certainly hope that he does. But let's.
Me too. Me too. He's a little bit older of a number 2, a second-year wide receiver because he'll be 25 during the season. So interesting that that's the case because we had those pandemic years where they got an extra year in college, basically.
Yep.
So some
All
older
right.
rookies lately.
Let's move on to the NFC East here for a couple teams. And we've got the New York Giants. They were rumored to trade up for Drake May at number 3. That didn't happen. They were rumored to be in the J.J. McCarthy mix. That didn't happen. They stayed put at 6, and they took Malik Neighbors, one of the best wide receivers in this draft class, and then they followed that up by taking safety Tyler Newman, cornerback Andrew Phillips. They also took very athletic spark phenom and tight end Theo Johnson as well, who I think is going to supplant Waller this year, whether Darren Waller comes back or not. And they also took Tyrone Tracy Jr., the running back who also was pretty athletic, and then finished out their draft with Darius Mousau, who is a linebacker, and that's it. They only had 6 picks in this draft class. Jeff, do you think they did enough? Do you think they should have traded down? Like, is there anything that you would have done different? What do you think about the Giants draft class?
I mean, overall, I think they're still hurting at running back. Obviously, their wide receiver core got an upgrade with Neighbors, but do we even know for sure that they have a quarterback that can throw the ball to a wide receiver that's this talented? We'll see. I am leaning towards Daniel Jones is not going to be the guy of the future, but I think I've heard rumors and inklings that they're considering Drew Lock at quarterback as well this year, unless I dreamt it.
You liked Drew Lock when he was with the Seahawks, so why not with the Giants?
Oh, I would love. I mean, I know what Daniel Jones is at this point. He does add with his running ability, but how much is he going to be able to run this year coming off the torn ACL? I would be leaning towards a Drew Lock shot before Daniel Jones. But according to CBS Sports, Giants uh, are going to give Drew Lock a chance to compete with Daniel Jones. So I don't know I don't know if it's like a 20% chance or what, but there is a chance that Drew Lock is the week 1 starter here.
All right. We will see how that plays out. I mean, obviously, we cannot forget they still have Tommy DeVito on the roster, and he is the greatest of the three. So we'll see how that plays out. Um, let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles. They drafted Quinion Mitchell, cornerback, at number 22. They almost had to trade up for him, but he just fell right in their lap. Like this happens to them all the time. They did trade
With
up in
defensive
the second
players.
round to take. Yep. They did trade up in the second round for Cooper DeJean, who is a defensive back. It's questionable whether he's a corner or a safety at this point, but he's a very athletic player and he brings a lot to it. They also took edge Jalix Hunt, who a lot of people are pretty high on. They took running back Will Shipley, which was interesting. He's kind of similar to Swift, who just left, probably a little bit less athletic than him. They also took wide receiver Anais Smith out of A&M, linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr., whose father played for him in the league, and then Trevor Keegan, a guard, Johnny Wilson, who I also liked probably more than Anais Smith. He's a really tall wide receiver. And they did say they're keeping him at wide receiver and not moving him to tight end. They finished with getting a backup center and Dylan McMahon. And let's not forget that they signed A.J. Brown to a 3-year extension. So, Jeff, what do you make of all these moves?
You know how much I hate the paying 2 wide receivers and a quarterback. And they could be the first team to do that because in 2 years the Devonta Smith extension will kick in. In 2 years the AJ Brown extension will kick in, and the Jalen Hurts of it all. I don't think they can get out of it anytime soon, just because of how many dummy years that they put on the contract. We will see what comes out of that, but I think the Eagles really hit all of their positions of need. They even went and grabbed a rookie running back to back up Barkley, but I don't think he'll be the primary backup this year. I think it'll be Gainwell this year, and then he'll step into that role in 2025. Johnny Wilson was a good get. They've snagged a few wide receivers off of the waiver wire that were a little bit surprising this year. Devontae Parker, Paris Campbell, CJ Uzama, not a receiver but a pass catcher. They're kind of loaded on offense. They even have Ty Davis Price from San Francisco last year. I don't think he's much of a prize, but he could definitely add to the ground game in a pinch. So they grabbed Kenny Pickett as a backup. I feel like they've done a lot this offseason. I don't know if it works out because I don't know how I feel about Nick Sirianni as head coach, but he has all the tools and weapons this year to give it a shot and give it a go this year.
Yeah, I thought this was a really good draft from them. So we will see how many of these guys pan out and how they do this year. But we can move on to another team that I don't think had as good a draft class, and that is the San Francisco 49ers. They surprisingly took Ricky Pearsall in the first round. I thought he's kind of like a round 2, round 3 turn of a player. And they took him at the end of the first round. So that was interesting. Felt like they reached for Bernardo Green, cornerback, in the second. They got a good offensive lineman in Dominic Muni for their situation, for their offense. So he fits them pretty well. And they also took Malik Mustafa safety. So what's interesting for me is taking running back Isaac Garendo. He's one that's just athletically gifted, but's got no polish and no game film that makes him look like he's going to be a good running back early. And they also, as undrafted free agents, signed Cody Schrader and Tariq Owens. Tariq Owens is Terrell Owens' son. And they drafted Jacob Cowan, who is a decent wide receiver who I think could be okay, and a guard and a linebacker at the end of the draft. So out of these guys, Ricky Pearsall is probably going to be the most interesting one for me. Probably goes in first round of rookie drafts just because of the landing zone and the possibility of them moving on from Debo or Ayuk. But they've not had a good track record of drafting running backs. So I'm not super thrilled with Isaac Garendo going there, especially behind who they have there, McCaffrey. And I'm not a fan of Cody Schrader going there either. So we'll see. Jacob Cowan could be pretty decent, but we will see on that front too. Jeff, do any of these names stand out to you?
I think a lot depends on what they do with Ayuk and Debo if there's movement this summer. or if it's one more year running it back, I think that could really hurt Ricky Purcell's draft stock and even rookie drafts because people draft for this year and for the future. So that is something people will keep in mind. Same thing with Jacob Cowing. And I believe they have a new TO as well, right?
Yeah.
Tariq Owens.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like that's a loaded wide receiver room, but maybe they needed that at this point. They have Jennings still, the Super Bowl hero. I think at one point when they were leading, I had him as the Super Bowl MVP in my head, at least. Um, so it'll be an interesting year for them and see how everything shakes out. I do think this is the last year on the roster for Elijah Mitchell. So he's entering year 4. His contract will be up after this year. I don't see them re-signing him. I see them moving on from him. But they also have Jordan Mason. So Isaiah Grendo here could be he could be the 4th back this year, but he could be as high as the 2nd back after this year.
Okay. Now we can move on to the Seattle Seahawks. And they stayed put in the first round after talk of potentially trading down. And they took defense tackle Byron Murphy, who might have gone as early as number 8 in this draft. So they got a good value there. I think he's the best defensive lineman, in my opinion, especially interior in this draft. And they did not have a second round pick, and they took Christian Haynes, a guard, in the 3rd round, which I thought was a really good value for that spot. To me, those were the 2 best picks for their entire draft class, and I just thought they just took a lot of lottery picks later in the draft. So they addressed a lot of needs. They got an additional tight end, AJ Barner. They got 2 different cornerbacks late and more offensive linemen. Jeff, does anyone say no for you for Seattle, or you just thought this was?
I mean, I kind of expected them to do something at quarterback. The fact that they didn't really speaks to me that they might be higher on Sam Howell. Like they're actually saying they're high on Sam Howell, but to say something and actually mean it and follow through with it are 2 different things typically, and this might be a time where they actually meant it and this wasn't just coach speak. Because I don't think Geno is the long-term solution here. But if we're looking at the Seahawks, I do like that they grabbed a tight end. We need a guy behind Fant. They're typically, and this year is going to be interesting because this is the first non-Pete Carroll year. So basically, I don't know if they're going to use the tight ends the same way. I don't know if they're going to go to a 3 receiver set because they do have 3 great wide receivers, and I know you like Bobo. Also, it's just I think this is a transition year, and I don't know if it's going to be a good transition.
Well, I think they did their best to address the offensive line with 3 selections here, and
For sure.
I think Byron Murphy is going to help them fix their defense as well as taking a stab at 2 corners. But for the Sam Howell trade, I think they knew that there was a good chance a bunch of quarterbacks get taken in front of them, and they didn't want to be left with nothing. So they traded for Sam Howell as like an insurance policy that if they couldn't get a quarterback, then he would still a good young quarterback who can develop behind Geno, potentially take over for Geno. And the 6 quarterbacks went the first 12 picks, so there really wasn't anyone left for them to take. They didn't really have the assets to be able to trade up since they didn't have a second round pick. It makes sense to just take the best available player and roll with what they had. So I don't fault them for it at all.
Yeah, and I mean I still fault Washington for trading away Sam Howell. I would have kept him and used him as my backup, but a cheap backup, but they clearly did
You
not
have to
feel the
clear the
same that
way.
we do.
You have to clear the way for the next starter, and that's what Washington did.
Yeah, I don't know if Sam Howell was ever drafted as the guy in Washington. I do feel like that was the one difference there. Washington did not feel the same way, and that's really all that matters at the end of the day.
All right, we got 2 teams left, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the next one. They took Swiss Army knife on the offensive line, Grant Barton, who might play center, might play guard. He could still play tackle, but they need him there, so we'll see where he eventually slots out. But solid pick there. He might have gone earlier to the Steelers if they went a different direction, but they also took an edge rusher in the 2nd round, Chris Braswell. They took safety in the 3rd round, Tyke Smith. Slot wide receiver, Jalen McMillan, who's probably taken over Godwin's role in the next year or 2, potentially. And they took a clone for their current running back in Bucky Irving, so I thought that was interesting. And they rounded out the rest of their draft with guard Elijah Klein and tight end Devin Culp. So, Jeff, what do you make of the Buccaneers?
Man, so their offense is going to look the same yet different this year. Do you think Devin Culp is a potential starter, or do you think K. Dotton is the no-brainer starter going into this year, and he's just like a ancillary piece at tight end?
Jadon, by far the best. Yeah, I don't even think he would supplant him.
Yeah, tight end was hard to judge this year so far because of how undervalued they seemed. A lot of them went a lot lower than I thought they would. But Bucky Irving, he might spell White a little bit here and there, but similar type back. I didn't see them get the pounder that could have taken some meaningful snaps away from Rashad White, and I think Rashad White needs to still be drafted as a top 15 running back in the league, if not a top 12. I know you don't see his talent. I know you don't believe in it completely, but we'll see there. Jalen McMillan, they have three good receivers that I like better than him right now, but obviously this could be Godwin's last year on the team, so there could be a spot for him as early as 2025. So I look at everything through my redraft lens, far off the radar for me, and everything through my dynasty lens, and I would consider drafting Jalen McMillan in probably the third round of my dynasty draft. I mean, those are my two lenses that I look through. He's not a guy that I would start at all in dynasty this year, and that's why I'm not
Yeah.
going to look at him in redraft. So, but as far as everything else, it looks like they hit a few positions of need, and we'll see here how their offense looks with Dave Canales going over to Carolina.
Okay, and we'll just end it on the Washington Commanders, the last team to talk about. They took the second quarterback off the board at the second spot, and that is Jaden Daniels out of LSU. They somehow were able to take Jerry Newton, defensive tackle out of Illinois, at number 36 in the draft. He was someone that people thought would go in the first round. He slid to the second round, so good move for them. And they also, in the second round, took cornerback Mike Sanderson out of Michigan, someone that I thought the Texans should be interested in, and he went after who the Texans took. They also took tight end Ben Sinnott, who is one of the top 5 rookie tight ends this year. So he could be in a really good spot with the Washington Commanders and finally be that tight end that they haven't had since Chris Cooley was a thing. They also took Brandon Coleman, a guard, at number 67, and then they took Luke McCaffrey, which is Christian McCaffrey's younger brother, wide receiver out of Rice. They took him at number 100. They took linebacker Jordan McGee and safety Dominic Hampton, edge Javante Jean-Baptiste as well at the end of the draft. So a lot of young, talented players towards the first half of this draft. Washington has a chance, if they hit on these guys, could turn around their fortunes fairly early. Jeff, I know I'm not that big on Jaden Daniels compared to other quarterbacks in this draft class. Where do you feel about him and Ben Sonnet and Luke McCaffrey?
So I feel like Jaden Daniels could be the best quarterback in this draft, but it'll depend on the staff that's working with him. I'm not so sure that their head coach, a defensive-minded head coach, is someone that I would want working with him directly, but that is the path that they're going down. Ben Sinnott, I have him right now. I believe I have him as the second tight end because I did sign Zach Ertz this offseason, but Zach Ertz could be a one and done there. He's going into year 12. So I don't really know how much gas he has left in the tank. I know he's one of your favorites. So there is that. And then obviously Luke McCaffrey. If he's even 80% of what Christian McCaffrey is as a football player, he's going to be a stud. But I think that's a hard benchmark for Luke McCaffrey to get to, especially at pick 100. But I do wonder, though, what order these wide receivers shake out this year, because I'm not so sure that Jahan Dotson is the no-brainer number 2. He didn't show me enough last year to have that role. How do you think that the wide receiver room shakes out here?
I think Dotson's still number 2 to start the year. I know they had Diami Brown and Jamison Crowder as well. Luke McCaffrey, I don't necessarily expect him to perform right away, but I do think he'll probably be like a wide receiver 3 for this team, or maybe a wide receiver 4. I don't necessarily think he's going to be the top 2. So Washington may be looking at bringing in another wide receiver this offseason, or next year they're going to have to upgrade, in my opinion.
Exactly. And I don't know how much of a passing offense they're going to be with Jaden Daniels, but we'll see all of those answers very shortly. And the last thing I will say on this, they also have Zacchaeus at wide receiver, but he's probably more of a roster casualty at the end. But we will see what happens there. But we're getting real close, Alex, to the schedule release, and the projected date for the schedule release for the NFL is May 9th. So we're right around the corner from that.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
Me too. Great podcast. That's one of our more fun podcasts that we do.
All right. Well, that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading or listening to this episode, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
You can find us on all podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy and with our handle at N2E Fantasy on all social media platforms. Please join our community and give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.